I, 32-year-old female, caught my son, 15-year-old male, cuddling with his friend, 15-year-old male, while they were sleeping in their room. I decided not to wake them up, and I discussed it with my husband, 34-year-old male, and the possibility that our son might be gay came up. While I initially agreed with my husband's suggestion to approach our son when his friend leaves, I later decided that we should just wait until our son was comfortable sharing this with us. My husband argued, saying, "What if he never tells us that he's gay?" I told my husband that if he doesn't tell us that he's gay, then he's probably not. I told him that we should just let our son know that we'll love him regardless, and leave it at that. However, my husband went against our agreement and questioned our son about his intimacy orientation while I was driving my son's friend home. When I returned home, I discovered my son in tears, yelling and accusing me of outing him. I was confused and told my son that I didn't know what he was talking about. My son told me, while he was crying, that his father revealed what I saw and basically coerced him into coming out before he was ready. My son asked me why I would tell his father, and why would I enter his room without his permission. I started crying and told my son that I was sorry and that I loved him and accept him no matter what. My son remained distant and is now refusing to speak to me and his father. When I confronted my husband, I told him that I was angry that he threw me under the bus. He claimed he didn't mean any harm, only shared what I mentioned to our son, hoping it'll make him comfortable about coming out to us. Despite his pleas for forgiveness, I can't help but feel anger towards him, knowing that my son is now feeling hatred for me because of something that I actively tried to prevent. My husband argues that blaming him for our son's emotions is unfair, and told me our son is only going through an emotional phase that will pass. Despite him begging for my son and my forgiveness, telling us that he meant no harm, I'm torn between forgiving him because I blame him for causing our son to be angry with me. ETA. I entered my son's room because I was doing laundry and planning on washing my son's clothes. I did knock to see if they were awake and waited for a response, and when I got no response, I entered. I usually do this when I plan on washing clothes, as I like to do it early in the morning. I've been doing this since my son was 12, and he told me he didn't mind it because he would wake up with clean clothes. When I saw my son and his friend cuddling, I immediately walked out of his room and shut the door. I wasn't thinking straight and should have waited for his friend to leave. Sorry for not mentioning this before. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Your husband is the jerk. You did nothing wrong in telling your husband about what you saw. He is your partner. You should confide in him, especially if it's regarding your children. Now, what your husband did was wrong. He should have never approached your son about it, and honestly, he deliberately did it behind your back. He definitely did it on purpose because he knew you would stop him. Your husband owes your son a huge apology. You, on the other hand, didn't do anything wrong. Your son will come around. He's probably just in shock. I'm sure he's thought of how to approach you all about it for a long time, and that's just not what he was expecting. Comment 2. Not the jerk. Yeah, your husband screwed up big time. Your suggestion to wait until your son was comfortable with coming out on his own in his own way was of course correct. Your husband, despite his pleas of innocence, betrayed your trust and your son's privacy. He has created a terrible rift in the family, and it is he who has to fix it between you and your son. He created the mess, and he needs to clean it up. You need to go to your husband with this, and if he doesn't straighten it out right now, he will be spending a lot of cold nights this winter. Now for the update. Hey everyone, it's been a hectic couple of weeks since my last post, and a lot has happened. I know you all were invested in the situation with my son, so I wanted to give you an update. After the confrontation with my husband, things were tense at home. My son was still not talking to either of us, and it was heartbreaking. I remembered how, when he was little, he would come running to me with his problems, and now he was shutting me out. My husband, on the other hand, was trying to make amends, but his efforts seemed to only make things worse. Then one evening, my son's friend came over. I was surprised, because I hadn't seen him since the day I drove him home. He asked to speak with me privately. I learned that he had been through a similar situation with his own parents, and he wanted to help. He shared how he felt when he was outed, and how important it was to have support from friends and family. It was a moment that made me realize how much my son needed us to be there for him, even if he wasn't ready to talk. The next day, I decided to try a different approach. I left a note under my son's door, telling him that I was sorry for everything and that I would give him space until he was ready to talk. I also mentioned that his friend had come by and that we were both there for him. It was a small gesture, but I hoped it would show him that I respected his feelings. Surprisingly, that night, my son came down for dinner. It was the first time in weeks. We didn't talk about what happened, but we shared a meal, and it felt like a step in the right direction. My husband tried to join in, but my son was still not ready to forgive him. I could see the pain in my husband's eyes, but I also understood my son's hurt. In the days that followed, my son started to open up a little. He would talk about school and his friends, but he avoided any personal topics. I respected his boundaries and didn't push him. I remembered how, when he was younger, he would take his time to come to me when he was ready to talk about something important. One afternoon, while my husband was at work, my son sat down with me in the living room. It was the first time he initiated a conversation since the incident. He told me about his feelings and how he was struggling with his identity. He wasn't sure about his orientation and felt pressured to label himself. I listened, holding back my own emotions, and reassured him that he didn't need to figure everything out right now. As for my husband, he's been trying to rebuild the trust he broke. He's been reading articles and joining forums to better understand how to support our son. I can tell he regrets his actions deeply, and he's been more considerate about giving our son space. Just yesterday, my son and his friend were laughing in his room, and it was the most beautiful sound. It reminded me of the days when they were younger, playing video games and joking around. It was a moment that gave me hope that things were slowly getting better. My husband and I have also started to communicate more. We've had long discussions about how to handle things differently in the future and how important it is to support each other as parents. It's been a learning experience for both of us, and I believe it's brought us closer in some ways. As for my son, he's still on his journey, and I'm learning to be patient and supportive. He hasn't fully forgiven his father yet, but I can see that they're both trying. It's not easy, but I'm hopeful that with time, our family will heal from this. I bought my nanny a house for raising me, and my dad demands I do the same for him. Oh boy, he lives to regret it. So I, a 30-year-old woman, recently bought a house for my former nanny. My entire childhood, I was raised by my nanny Jane, as my mom was the breadwinner, and my dad wasn't in the picture at all. Jane attended every after-school activity, graduation, and parent-teacher conference. Jane basically raised me, and I see her as my second mom. My mom employed Jane as a nanny housekeeper from when I was 2 until I was 28, when my mom passed away due to cancer. As a result, I inherited everything. My mom was a successful surgeon with her own practice, and my grandparents left her with a few properties in her home country. I have since rented the properties out, giving me a good rental income. Well, after my mom passed away, Jane was there for me. She helped me make all of the funeral arrangements and contact relatives from my mom's home country. After she helped me through this difficult time, I wanted to do something nice to thank Jane. As a birthday gift, I surprised Jane with the deed to a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house in an area of the country she had always talked about wanting to retire at. Jane tried to decline the gift, saying it was too much, but I told her she was like a second mother to me and that this was the least I could do for her, as thanks for raising me. Well, somehow word got back to my dad that I had bought a house for Jane, and he turned up at my mom's old practice demanding to talk to me. I didn't even know who the man was, as I've seen him less than 20 times in my entire life. He claimed to be my father and yelled at me for buying a house for a stranger over someone who is family, and says he and his family of 5 have been struggling financially. He even had the audacity to say that I should buy a house for him and my half-siblings, whom I have never met, because they are my blood family and I owe it to them. I laughed in his face and told him that Jane had been far more involved in my life growing up than he ever had, and that I didn't care if he was struggling financially. Security then escorted him to his car and made sure he left the property. My dad's side of the family has now been trying to reach out through Facebook. Complete strangers who I've never met are saying I'm a jerk and that my mom never let him be part of my life. I know this is false, since I remember my mom calling him over the years, asking him to pick me up on the weekends to spend time with me, and he never did. I tried to talk with my friend Aidan, a 34-year-old man, about this problem. He recently reconnected with his dad, whom he hadn't seen since he was 6 due to his dad being incarcerated. Aidan told me that my dad probably had a good reason for abandoning me, and that I'm the jerk, because some people don't even have dads. I reminded him I was one of those people, and now he's refusing to talk to me. So Reddit, am I the jerk? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. You did a kind and generous thing. Jane deserved it for being like a second mother to you and being there for you during difficult times. Your father doesn't have the same claim as her. Family is about the relationships and connections we build, not just biological ties. Don't feel bad about prioritizing the people who have been there for you, regardless of blood relations. Comment 2, not the idiot. Aiden is projecting. His dad was unable to take care of him because he was incarcerated. Your dad was free, but taking care of his second family, and you only became important when he heard you got rich and are generous. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments on my last post. It's been a wild week, and I've got quite the update for you all. After the whole confrontation with my dad at my mom's old practice, things didn't calm down. In fact, they got even more intense. My dad's family kept bombarding me with messages on Facebook, trying to guilt-trip me into helping them out. They were sharing stories about how my dad was always talking about me and how he regretted not being there. But I knew better. I remembered all the times my mom tried to get him involved, and he just wasn't interested. In the midst of all this, Jane called me. She was worried about the whole situation. She's always been protective of me, just like she was when I was a kid. I remember when I was 10, and I fell off my bike. She was the one who patched me up and comforted me, not my dad. Jane told me she had a talk with my dad. She said she couldn't stand by and watch him try to manipulate me. I was shocked. Jane, sweet and gentle, had confronted my dad. She told him about all the years she raised me, all the moments he missed, and how he didn't have any right to demand anything from me. Meanwhile, Aiden and I were still not talking. I missed my friend, but I couldn't believe he took my dad's side. It hurt, especially since Aiden knew all about my childhood. He was there when I waited for my dad to show up for my 16th birthday, and he never did. Aiden was the one who stayed with me all night, eating the cake that was supposed to be for my dad and me. But then, 2 days ago, Aiden showed up at my door. He apologized. He said he had been thinking about his own situation with his dad and realized he was projecting his feelings onto me. He admitted he was wrong and that he should have supported me. It was a relief to have my friend back. The biggest shock came yesterday. My dad showed up again, this time at my house, but it wasn't like last time. He was calmer, and he actually wanted to talk. He told me that after Jane had spoken to him, he started to see things differently. He said he was sorry for not being there for me and that he was wrong to ask me for a house. He admitted that he was just desperate and didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to say. I was angry, but a part of me felt sorry for him. I told him that while I appreciated his apology, it didn't change the past. I said I needed time to process everything. He nodded, understanding, and left without another word. It was a lot to take in. I never expected an apology from him, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it. As for Jane, she's been settling into her new house. She sent me pictures of the garden she's starting. It's full of roses and daisies, her favorites. She's happy, and that's all I ever wanted for her. She's planning to have a small housewarming party next month. And I can't wait to see her in her new home, surrounded by the life she's built for herself. My American in-laws ignored me for a week, and then sister-in-law throws tantrum on my wedding day. Now she and her husband hold the video hostage. Oh boy. Some short background. I, 27-year-old female, am from the UK, while my husband, 38-year-old male, is from the US. We've been doing long distance for 2 years at this point, where he comes to visit, and we were saving up for me to visit there. However, it's expensive, and my son has school, which, if you've been on holiday in term time, you know it's 1,000 times more expensive than not. I've met my in-laws over video calls, but not in person until a week before my actual wedding. In contrast, I had met my husband at least 10 times in those 2 years of us dating, with him staying with me for 2 weeks or longer each time. When I got to America and we finally met the family, it was hard, because they claimed they wanted to get to know me so many times, but none of them actually tried to make conversation with me. They didn't ask questions, and they were all talking about things I had no idea about, such as sports or something I couldn't even try to engage in. They kept claiming they wanted to get to know me, but every time I went outside for a breather from awkward social situations due to severe anxiety, they saw it as me being unable to get to know them. I felt ignored and invisible. The wedding day itself went great. We got ready, got married, and started partying. However, it was the same situation as before. No one spoke to me. The only people who actually had conversations with me were my friends, and we went outside together while she had a smoke because I didn't want to be alone. My husband and I spent most of our time together, and around 8 p.m. my friend left. No one was speaking to me or my husband much at that point. Then, 9 p.m. rolls around, and I get out of my dress and start trying to pack things up so there wouldn't be much to be done at the end of the night. Well, that's when my sister-in-law, 48-year-old female, realizes we're leaving. Meanwhile, my husband is currently playing with my 5-year-old son and his cousin, too preoccupied to hear his sister scream at me, asking if we're leaving. She was in severe shock. She screamed at me 3 times until she then stormed out and threw a tantrum. My husband tried to go and calm her, but that didn't work. She continued crying when I let my husband know that the Uber is here and we have to go. I was exhausted and extremely annoyed at this point after being screamed at, and completely exhausted. I just wanted to leave. So I shouted to my husband that I'm leaving with or without him. I know it wasn't my brightest moment, but I was tired, especially with my body clock not changing either. We left, and now his sister is mad. Her husband is mad. And her husband confiscated the wedding video he took of us. He said we can't have it because I was immature for not staying a little longer when I saw my sister-in-law was upset. I do understand her being upset, but at the same time, couldn't she have pulled us aside and had a civil conversation with us, rather than screaming at me and throwing a tantrum like a child? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. It's your husband's problem to deal with too. Congratulations on your wedding. Onwards and upwards from here. Comment 2. I do understand her being upset. Could you explain it to me because I sure don't? Now for the update. Hey Reddit, it's been a month since my last post about my wedding drama, and oh boy, do I have an update for you. Buckle up, because things have gone from bad to worse. So after the whole fiasco with my sister-in-law, things cooled down for a bit. My husband and I tried to reach out to her and her husband to smooth things over, but they were having none of it. They were still holding the wedding video hostage, and every attempt at communication ended in them rehashing the same argument about how I disrespected them by leaving early. Now, here's where it gets juicy. Remember how I mentioned my husband was playing with my son and his cousin during the wedding? Well, turns out that cousin is actually my sister-in-law's son, and he's been having a tough time at school. He's been bullied, and my husband has been a sort of mentor to him, which is why they were so close at the wedding. My sister-in-law, however, took my husband's attention to her son as him choosing our side of the family over hers, which added fuel to her fiery temper. But wait, there's more. My husband's brother, who's always been the peacemaker in the family, tried to intervene. He suggested a family dinner, thinking it would help mend fences. So, we agreed, thinking it could be a fresh start. Big mistake. The dinner was a disaster from the start. My sister-in-law made passive-aggressive comments about my cooking, and her husband kept making snide remarks about British time management. I tried to keep my cool, but the tension was thick. Then, out of nowhere, my sister-in-law brought up the wedding video again, accusing me of being selfish and inconsiderate. That's when my husband lost it. He stood up for me, telling them that their behavior was out of line and that they were the ones being immature. This led to a shouting match with everyone airing their grievances. It was like a scene from a reality TV show, except there were no cameras, just a lot of hurt feelings. In the midst of the chaos, my son, who's been struggling with all the tension, started crying. That was the last straw for me. I grabbed my son, told everyone that this wasn't the environment I wanted him to be in, and we left. My husband followed shortly after, and we haven't spoken to his sister or her husband since. Now here's the kicker. A few days after the disastrous dinner, my husband's brother came over to apologize for how everything went down. He confessed that he knew his sister had been struggling with some personal issues, and that she probably took it out on us. He also revealed that she's been seeing a therapist, which none of us knew about. Feeling a bit guilty, I suggested to my husband that maybe we should give her another chance, considering she's going through a tough time. But he's not having it. He's fed up with her behavior and thinks she's using her personal issues as an excuse to treat us poorly. So now, we're stuck in this weird limbo. My husband is torn between his loyalty to his family and his need to protect our little unit. And I'm caught in the middle, trying to be supportive, but also feeling like an outsider in this family drama. To top it all off, my son has been asking about the wedding video, wanting to see himself dancing and playing with his new cousin. It breaks my heart that we can't show him those memories because of this ongoing feud. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.